Very good afternoon to all of you, and a new greetings to all the participants as well as the panelists who have joined us today on a very special, I would say, subject masterclass which we are going to organize today. I know we start a new year with the new hopes and new beginnings, and of course, the technology becomes the backbone for all the survival which we have faced it for last year, and we hope that technology plays. We know that rather, I would say, technology plays a major role in the upcoming times also for the things which we keep on doing, whether for increasing the efficiency, productivity, transparency, and all. And when we talk about technologies, FICCI has been committed with our members to work on the various areas, especially the emerging tech areas, which are playing an important role in the overall, I would say, revolutionizing the sectors, or I would say increasing the productivity and, in fact, increasing the governance. So all those things keeping in mind and in view of our FICCI's commitment working towards the various technology areas, we have taken up various series. We've talked about earlier with the AI, and now here we come here now with an important subject on blockchain. The subject blockchain is something which has not been new right now. It's been in discussion for many, I would say, a couple of years now. And even from India's perspective, we have been heard various initiatives being taken at both the center and the state level, be it the ministry, be it the Niti Aayog, be it the various state. They have come up with, there are some states which are working on the policies. There are few which have already come out, and there is various, I would say, the practical, I would say, the implementation which has been done at the various areas, especially looking into the areas of smart contracts, finance, and logistics. Because we all know that the importance of blockchain, how this technology is actually going to help us increasing the, I would say, security, transparency, robustness, and of course, taking care of your efficiency and productivity. So we all realized that, and we thought, what could be better than just rather having a talk? We should have a specific technical masterclass with the support of our member Emargo, who has kindly agreed to join us for this discussion today. So I really thank the panelists from the Emargo who will join in. We have Mr. Narinder Balachandran and Mr. Bharat Malapur, who will, of course, talk through during the discussion. So thank you, Emargo, for joining in here. And thank you for participants for showing your good interest. We've got a very good response in terms of the registrations, and we equally look forward to your stronger participation during the discussion. Please feel free to write your questions during the discussion. My colleagues will take it up with the panelists post the masterclass is done. And if any questions we are not able to take up during the discussion because of the paucity of time, we'll definitely get back to you separately offline, and you can let us know. So with these words, and of course, we eagerly wait for your feedback. So do keep us informed what you feel FICCI should do further in future. What are the things we should take it now? But I'll stop myself here, and I officially welcome you all. Thank you all. May this new year bring some lots of health, good health, prosperity, and of course, new hopes for all of us, and we all remain safe and healthy. So with these wishes, I start this masterclass on the blockchain, and now I request Mr. Narinder Balachandran. Mr. Narinder Balachandran from Emargo to kindly deliver his opening remarks. He's the Chief Business Officer for there. So over to you, Mr. Narinder.
Thank you so much, Sarika. Thank you so much for a warm welcome. And once again, a very happy new year from our end to all the participants and to you as well. So it's actually a momentous occasion for all of us, because I think we are in one of those times where these are unprecedented times. But as Sarika rightly mentioned, that technology is where this is all going to kind of culminate into. And in that perspective, very happy that all of us are kind of associated with one of those emerging technologies, which is slated to transform the entire way we are going to work. I'm sure the moment it's going to transform the way we work, it's also going to be as much incremental to our robust economy build as well. And this is exactly what all of us are aspiring for. So this technology definitely is something that overall we feel in the next, I would say, maximum about 2 years is going to evolve, into mainstream adoption. And as a country, we are going to definitely play a very important role in, as always, India has been, a very big significant player when it comes to technology. We will also be a significant player when it comes to blockchain as a technology as well. And needless to say, FICCI's role in that FICCI has always been one of those bodies which is very, very instrumental in terms of not only just networking, but also ensuring that all these deep tech technologies are, evangelized at the first instance, then collaborated, and then kind of put into implementation as well. So on behalf of Team Emergo, we would like to thank FICCI for doing a wonderful job, and we wish you the very best to continue the same as well. On this note, I would like to say that, Vicky. So without much ado, let's get started, because I know we do have only a limited 1 hour, 15 minutes for us right now. So I just would like to quickly summarize as to who we are as an organization and how is it that we are talking about blockchain. So Emergo as an organization, we are a blockchain product company. We have our own protocol on blockchain, which is called as Cardano. So Cardano is the third generation of blockchain. So which in the actual terms is the latest in this time that we are in right now. So third generation of blockchain, Cardano is what is our own product. Emergo, we are the enterprise arm of Cardano. Apart from that, Emergo, we are the Digital Commerce, the Chamber of Digital Commerce Executive Committee member. So this is one of the committee members that steers a lot of decision making in the US. Apart from that, we are into a lot of blockchain related activities. We do a lot of consulting. We do we work with a lot of state governments, to help them in the e-governance. We have our own accelerator program. We have our own protocol. Apart from that, we do have a lot of innovation that's happening on blockchain. Then yes, the grassroots is what we build in, and that's exactly what we do in India, precisely, which is training and skilling. Because we, as an organization, we feel there is going to be a demand on blockchain trained professionals, and for that we need to start the work earlier than when the demand rises. So that's exactly why we do, we build the capacity right from grassroots levels, and that's precisely what Emergo Academy does. So overall, in a nutshell, very quick summary about Emergo. So without much more delay, I will want to pass this on to Bharat. Bharat, who's going to be handling the entire blockchain masterclass session. He is going to talk about the entire significance of this technology. And during the end of the session, we'll be more than happy to take the questions, and all the relevant questions will be answered. So that's about it from my end, Sarika. So it's all yours, Sarika.
Thank you, Narendra. Thank you. It's good to hear about Emergo. And as I mentioned, we are, as FICCI, we work very closely with our members to service our members. So we are thankful that Emergo being a member and contributing to this important discussion. It's really helpful. And we see that this is it's just a beginning, and there would be many things in the future. We would be taking it forward on the subject as well, along with Emergo and with the support of other members of FICCI. So with this, without wasting further time, and now I request Mr. Bharat Malapur, who is the Chief Technology Officer with Emergo Academy, to kindly take up with this masterclass on blockchain, the importance of blockchain and its impact on the industry. So over to you, Bharat.
All right. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you're loud and clear.
Okay, good. So welcome everyone. So it's an honor to be here, presenting this workshop on blockchain technology and what is its impact going to be on the Indian industry. So what we'll do is initially we'll try to understand a little bit about blockchain as a technology. Then we'll take a brief look at how blockchain is getting adopted globally, right? Because we always need to understand the global perspective. Where are the real opportunities which are going to come forward, right? And then from there, what we'll do is we'll try to take a look at what is the current scenario in the Indian industry, in the Indian scenario, government, etc. And based on that, we'll be able to understand what are the opportunities for growth going forward, right? So let me start off. So what is blockchain? So if you think about what is blockchain, basically, I think it has been put very well by Don Tapscott. He is one of the authors of a wonderful book which came out very early called The Blockchain Revolution, which he co-authored with his brother. And in that he says, to paraphrase him, the blockchain is a decentralized, incorruptible digital ledger of economic transactions that can be programmed to record not just financial transactions, but virtually everything of value. So let me break this down into the main key terms so that we can understand a little bit better about it. So the first thing you'll see is that it's a decentralized system. So in the coming slides, we'll try to understand a little bit more about what this decentralization means, and also what are the benefits that you get from it, right? So incorruptible, of course, due to its very strong cryptography, decentralized systems and consensus, it is incorruptible, which means it is almost impossible. It is almost impossible in the sense, maybe if a meteorite hits the earth, in that case, maybe you might find that you might be able to destroy the blockchain systems, but I don't think we need to worry about that because everything else will get destroyed. So incorruptible basically means that it is more than Six Sigma sort of doesn't look much compared to the kind of incorruptibility guarantees that you get with blockchains. So we'll try to understand what about that. Digital ledger, obviously, nowadays, everything is digitally transformed. Everything is mostly available as digital assets or digital transactions or digital records. But the combination of these things, decentralized, incorruptible, digital ledger of economic transactions. This is a very important thing. And the most important thing is that initially it was used only for financial transactions, but today it is being used for just about anything and everything. So we'll try to understand more about that. So I just said, we'll try to understand a little bit about decentralization, what it means. So in this particular case, you can see here, right? There are three images which you can see on the screen. One is centralized, then there is decentralized, and then there is distributed. So if you see the centralized system, for example, if you go to Facebook, right? Facebook typically, if somebody were to ask you who's the owner of Facebook, most people would answer Mark Zuckerberg, right? So what does this mean? That one person or one entity controls the entire system, right? So a good example of a centralized system is that. One more thing that you'll see is typically, for example, if I visit Facebook, everybody in India visits Facebook. The first thing that you'll see is that if, let's say, for example, the Indian server for Facebook goes down, immediately you'll see that, there is a remarkable slowdown, right? You will not be able to access, maybe some of them might not even be able to access the systems, right? Because there is a single point of failure. Typically it's a server. If the server goes down, very recently, I think just maybe 15, 20, 25 days ago, there was a small shutdown of Google services all over the world, and nobody was able to access Google, right? So this is what you call as centralized, right? Where there are some particular points to which you need to connect in order to connect to the network, right? So centralized systems are, something like this. There is a single point of control, right? But then if you look at it, Facebook is not really that centralized in the terms of the network architecture, in the sense, how do you connect to it? So if you see, for example, Facebook has mirror servers, as they call them, right? Where there are servers in Singapore, India, maybe Europe, and all these places. So that first thing is, you are able to access these systems very easily. And second thing is that, the speed and the redundancy is much more. So this is, even though Facebook is centralized in control, it looks sort of like this. Let me just turn on my laser pointer. Yeah, so if, even though Facebook is singularly controlled by one entity, but it actually looks sort of like this, right? And decentralized technologies also sort of look similar. If you see the middle image, it's a decentralized technology. Now, the only difference between a decentralized and a distributed system is that the distributed system is under the control of one entity typically. For example, let's say, this is the entire servers of Facebook in the world. And Mark Zuckerberg says, we have to close down these particular section of nodes. Then automatically those would get shut down within a few minutes, right? But compare this to, let's say, a blockchain network, right? For example, the first blockchain network is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin being a decentralized network, the person who actually created the network, Satoshi Nakamoto, right? Even if, for example, he were to put out an order saying that, shut down Bitcoin network, there would be absolutely no difference. It would not make any difference because it's a decentralized network, which means that no one entity controls the network, which means that all of us together are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep and the entire execution of this network, right? So this is a very, very attack resistant networks. This is going to be very, very useful in, say, cyber warfare or something like that, where you have to have very, very attack resistant networks. So decentralized networks, because they don't have one central point of control, they are very, very resistant to attacks. For example, the analogy I can give is, let's look at an army, Typically, an army was typically headed by generals, right? So it was always the aim of the enemy soldiers to try and take out the general, because once you manage to take out the general, the army sort of becomes uncoordinated, right? So it becomes very easy to then take over or defeat the other army, because there's no coordination anymore. So you can immediately see that the general is sort of the central points of control, or even if there are multiple generals, there are central points of control. You knock them out, you're knocked out almost effectively the whole army, right? So compare this to say blockchains, and blockchains, there are no generals at all. It is entirely a self-coordinating system. Everybody is sort of acting like a general as well as a soldier. So this is a very, very remarkable property of blockchains. Now, today, centralization is ubiquitous. It is everywhere, right? Whether it be Facebook, Google, Instagram, Twitter, or let's say, for example, banks, right? These are all examples of centralization. Now, of course, these are very, very powerful technologies. For example, Google has definitely taken us from, the 1990s to today's age where, everything is digital, right? In fact, if Google shuts down, we are unable to sort of coordinate our work anymore. It's just like that general. If the general gets executed or headless, then, the whole network goes for a toss, right? So banks are a special case. We trust them to do all our important financial transactions. They have powered the economy of the world since ages, right? Right from where banks became a formal part of the financial structure. But again, there are some problems here which banks are trying to resolve today, right? So if you see Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're free, they're fast, they're powerful, and we can't live without them. But there are some issues also. So we'll try to understand a little bit more about that. Just 1 second, I need to silence mine. All right. So what are the problems? Now, first problem that you have seen very recently, with say something like WhatsApp, you have seen that, there is some privacy terms which have changed, and a lot of people, a lot of organizations are now moving away from WhatsApp because of this. So privacy issues are definitely one problem. Then there are middleman issues, right? Middleman issues in the sense, for example, banks today, if to offer some sort of services, maybe let's say letter of credit or trade finance, today there are multiple middlemen in the midst between a bank and the other bank, right? So this means that there is a lot of delay, there is a lot of cross verification and unnecessary sort of paperwork and delays that happen due to that. For example, if somebody wants to send money from, let's say, Germany to India, right? Even if you use the SWIFT protocol, the banking SWIFT protocol, it takes 3 to 5 days at the very minimum to get the money, because there's a multiple levels of banks which which have to be involved in this entire transaction. Now, banks today are looking at blockchains to see whether you can entirely streamline this process, right? So we will understand a little bit more about it. Now, in some cases, you will also have seen gatekeepers. For example, Twitter recently, it has done some censorship, which has become an issue there, right? So gatekeepers means that there are some powerful entities which can stop free communication from happening, and the most dangerous one is cyber attacks, right? This is because if you see today's centralized systems, there is usually a master server. And if hackers, for example, manage to access that particular server, they get access to the entire records of the organization. For example, if you think about it, Facebook or Google have 2.5 billion subscribers, which means that the data of 2.5 billion subscribers is stored in some sort of a centralized repository. Now, if hackers manage to gain access to this data, they basically have access to almost half or more of the world's population and their private data. So this is actually a very, very worrying thing, and it is very important that we move to much more secure, scalable, and attack resistant kind of architectures and solutions, right? So this is where blockchains come in. Now, blockchains, basically, we talked about it, they are decentralized, right? So blockchain is a decentralized list of records, data records, right? You store data into a blockchain. So for example, if you take the simplest application of a blockchain, which is say a payment system, right? Earlier banks used to record their financial transactions in a ledger where there was a debit and a credit, and that had to be filled out, and then that was sort of settled across the entire bank branches. So there was a long settlement time, and then digitization sort of helped make that much better. Today, earlier it used to be like sometimes 5 to 10 days for a check to get processed, right? Today it's like within the day, mostly you'll see that checks get processed, right? That's because there is a lot of upgradation that has happened. Digital ledgers have come in, so transaction processing is far better today. But still, there is still a inordinate delay. It still takes around maybe half a day for things to happen, which you can also see that, for example, UPI and these instantaneous payments are happening. But there are still some issues. How do you make these networks or these applications very, very resistant to attack or to hacking or whatever you want to call it, right? So this is where blockchains come in. Now blockchains, if you see, they are basically just like there is a page in this ledger, there is a block in a blockchain, and a page might hold maybe a few hundred, maybe 100 transactions at the most. A blockchain, one particular block can hold thousands of transactions. First thing. Second thing is that the security of this blockchain is extremely high because of something called a blockchain. So there are multiple blocks, and they are all chained together in a cryptographic manner, which means there is some encryption and some data protection that happens at a very, very advanced level in the case of blockchains, right? So this basically means you get a tamper-proof ledger, right? So again, as I said, the problem with centralized servers is, it's very easy for somebody to attack the centralized server and gain access or change. Let's say, for example, financial transactions. If you can change or manipulate or tamper with financial transactions, it can cause, mayhem, right? So compare this to, say, a peer-to-peer where, let's say, for example, Facebook. I'll take an example of Facebook. Let's say these are all, this is Facebook server, and you have clients connecting to it. Compare this to a decentralized architecture where there are multiple nodes, right? Each let's say participant in the Facebook network sort of uses and stores data, his own personal data on his own system, and he gives access to that to other people as and when required. Now, in this particular case, if you see, let's say 2.2 billion subscribers of Facebook, each hosting their own data and giving access to the others. Now, for a hacker to gain this data becomes very, very difficult because of the fact that, he has to hack 2 billion nodes in order to get 2 billion people's data, right? So this is at the very onset, you can see how decentralization sort of makes sure that, it's much more difficult to get access to data, right? And of course, there is so many other layers of protection, cryptography, distributed consensus protocol, etc., which will not get into. That is more of a technical, seminar. But one thing you must understand is technologically, if you see blockchain networks, let's say Bitcoin, from the day that it started, 3rd January 2009, till today, it has never ever been hacked at the protocol level, right? That is a testament to the enormous security that comes with blockchain systems. So you get immutability, which means any transaction, once it enters the blockchain, becomes immutable. It cannot be changed by anyone in the world, right? So you can, of course, for example, if there is an erroneous transaction, that can always be, by the authorized people and by the consensus of the participants, you can always do an addendum where you say that, yeah, this was submitted wrongly. This is the actual transaction. But it is not possible to wipe the trail of transactions, which means always you have the entire audit trail available to you. Complete transparency. Anybody who's a participant in the network with the right privileges will be able to see each and every transaction, which means, for example, regulators can find it very, very easy to sort of regulate the entire economic transactions or value transactions, right? And security is enormous. As I said, blockchains are very, very, by design, they're resistant to attack of any kind. So if you see the evolution of blockchains, it also, of course, started out with Bitcoin, which was the first blockchain, which was a simple payment system, a global payment system. You can send money from anywhere to anywhere in the world. within 10 minutes, right? So you don't have to wait 3 to 5 days. You can do it within 10 minutes. Now, but it is a limited blockchain protocol in the sense that it is only designed for financial payments, nothing more than that, right? Then along in 2015, as blockchains became more and more popular and powerful, Ethereum came in, which was the first blockchain with smart contracts. Now, what do smart contracts give you? They give you the capability to run any kind of logic, any kind of application on top of a blockchain, which means Bitcoin as a global payment system was really wonderful, but that's all it could do. Global payment system, nothing more than. But if you look at Ethereum, an Ethereum blockchain with smart contracts can do just about anything. You can do crowdfunding, you can do supply chain management, healthcare, financial stuff, voting, just about any application that you can think of can be designed on top of a blockchain. And because it's designed on top of a blockchain, you get all the benefits of a blockchain: enormous security, immutability, trust that comes in because of the ability to be able to see each and every data transaction that happens, right? And then in 2017 came along something called enterprise blockchains, basically, which are specifically designed for enterprise usage, right? So this was more of a global peer-to-peer kind of a network. Enterprise blockchains basically means that these systems are specifically designed for business usage, right? Industry usage. So Hyperledger Fabric was the first enterprise blockchain to launch, and it is specifically designed for business usage, which means, for example, transactions are private. Only the participants or the buyer and the seller, for example, would be able to see the transaction, nobody else, stuff like that. But it still has most of the benefits of a blockchain system, in the sense that it is much more resistant to attack. It is immutable, it is auditable. By nature, it is auditable. You don't have to again do an audit. We'll take a look at how this is a really wonderful property. By nature, every transaction on the blockchain is audited, perfectly audited, right? So this means that you don't have to do any further audit process other than just ratifying the entire transactions. Now, enterprise blockchains came in, and then today, third generation blockchain protocols like Cardano and Algorand, they are scaling to the next level. So this basically means, for example, let's say, let's take a example of, say, Mastercard or Visa, right? Mastercard or Visa are global payment systems. They can process maybe 5,000 transactions per second, which means the whole world, they can do 5,000 transactions in a given second, right? Maximum they can go up to is maybe 30, 40, 50,000 transactions per second. But if you see, as more and more of the world's population starts becoming online, digital, right, there is a huge explosion that's going to happen in the transactional speed, right? And this cannot be met with without very, very high costs of scaling by conventional centralized systems, right? So this is where third generation blockchain protocols like Cardano, they are now able to scale to, let's say, 1 million transactions per second, which no centralized system of today will be able to do, right? So this is where the real value of blockchain starts getting unlocked. That is that, they bring in the next generation of transactional systems, right? And probably 2025 is when sort of blockchains will become mainstream. Mainstream as in they will be there in each and every application. Maybe by 2029, let's say, right? But by 2030, it is estimated by, not by me, but by some of the most World Economic Forums, is that by 2025, 10% of global GDP is going to be captured on blockchain systems. And by 2030, it's going to be completely mainstream. Each and every application in the world, whether it be trade finance, industry, supply chain, whatever it be, right? All of these systems are going to be interfacing and using blockchain services. So this is where we need to really understand how do we prepare for this next revolution, that is the financial blockchain revolution that's going to happen. So as I was saying, the main difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? Ethereum is that, it's very much similar to this, right? This is maybe a Samsung or a very, very basic Nokia phone. And if you want to add even a single feature into this phone, you basically have to change the phone, right? There's nothing you can do. You have to buy let's say, for example, this only supports calls and SMS, and you want a ringtone capability, or the ability to play music, you have to basically junk this phone and buy a new phone, right? Whereas if you see, let's say, a smartphone is like a mini computer. So which means that if you want to add any feature into this phone, all you do is typically you download some app, and suddenly you have that functionality available to you in the phone, whether it be using Google Maps or Google search engine, mail, tracking your fitness, how many steps you walked per day. Each and everything is doable in a smartphone. So similarly, Ethereum is a smart blockchain, which means you have the ability to do just about anything on this blockchain. All you need to do is write, or put in the correct smart contract, as it is called, and it sort of gives you that feature set, right? So what is the real benefit of blockchains? The real benefit of blockchains is that it establishes trust amongst people. For example, let's say today, if I want to book a cab, right, I can always go down to the the auto or the taxi stand or whatever, and I can tell them, I need to go here, and then they'll look at me and they'll say, okay, sir, pay me 200 rupees or whatever it is, right? So typically what is happening, there's a lot of issues here. Sometimes if I'm new to a city and I get out of the airport or whatever, and then I book a cab, there itself they'll either show me the entire city, or basically what will happen is I have to very much know the entire process. Otherwise, I might get cheated. Right? So this is where Uber and Ola came in, and they said, we will sort of give you the trust that you book on your phone, you get out of the airport, you get into a cab, it will deliver you directly to a destination, you will be billed exactly this amount. So the trust came in because of this middleman called Ola or Uber, right? But again, there are so many processes which are very, very inefficient in the case of any of these aggregators, right? Which is why you see that there is a lot of losses which happen. The revenue is very high, but the profitability is low, right? So this is where what can happen is that a lot of this entire inefficiency, the entire streamlining of these processes can happen through blockchain. You can either completely remove the aggregators and have direct B2 C2C, right, customer to customer kind of thing. Otherwise, you can have the solutions where these businesses actually streamline their entire process. The huge number of middlemen that come in each and every part of the process, these can be completely streamlined, which means that you can have a lot of efficiency, which means your speed of transaction goes up, as well as your efficiency, as well as your bottom line. All are benefited from this. So this is where enterprise blockchains are looking to solve many of the problems of industry, trying to give them the ability to do faster transactions for much, much cheaper. There are so many use cases which happened where around 90% of the cost has been cut out by banks. For example, for a let's say a cross-border payment, 90% of the cost has been saved, as well as the transaction happens in minutes instead of days together, right? So for example, a letter of credit can be done very, very fast. A cross-border payment, a global payment, can be done within maybe 1 or 2 minutes instead of 4 or 5 days, right? And the transaction fees are extremely low. For example, typically if you see a cross-border payment, let's say from Germany to India, you might end up paying 7 to 8% as transaction fees. And on top of it, you have this huge delay that happens. But today, banks are looking at blockchains to solve this problem, where within a minute, your cross-border transfer happens, and it costs you cents, fixed costs, instead of a percentage. So this is really, really revolutionary things that are happening with the help of blockchains. So help streamline processes and establish trust by consensus. So if you, for example, if you see typically traditional legal contracts are very, very time consuming to first of all record, agree upon, sign, and then execute, right? So for example, let's say somebody wants to go and buy an apartment, right? There's this buyer and seller authentication, verification of the land records, so many other legal checks that have to be done. Ultimately, the sale deed is drawn up and then it is executed at a sub-registrar office, right? So overall, this might take you 6 months to do, right? But then today what is happening is that the government is looking at, can we make land registries on the blockchain, which sort of means that there are ready-made sale deed contracts available. Just the specific terms are inserted into it. These are uploaded into the blockchain, and the sale happens within a few seconds or maybe a few minutes, without even having to visit the sub-registrar. Your entire identity verification, every aspect of your transaction can be verified on the blockchain, and make sure that the entire history of the land, for example, is well known to the participants even before they get into the transaction, right? So this is where governments are looking at this. Niti Aayog is looking at this in a big way, right? So are many of our state governments, because they understand that there is a lot of revenue which comes from these land sales, but there is a lot of inconsistencies. Sometimes something gets missed out, there's corruption, etc. So how does the government ensure that it gets its revenue from these sales, right? So all this can be done entirely very, very smoothly, very efficiently on a blockchain. So one thing that you must understand is, when you want to look at blockchains, there is some decisions which you need to do. Not all applications in the world are a perfect fit for blockchain. And even when you say that, okay, this use case does fit into a blockchain, there are some certain questions that you must ask before you decide which kind of a blockchain to use. So if you see here, is there a need to reduce middlemen or intermediaries, right? Are there multiple stakeholders involved? So if you are working with physical assets, where everything is on a notebook or in some on some khata, not a digital khata, but a normal khata, right? Maybe a record book, then it's very difficult to do this. You have to digitize the processes first. And do multiple parties require right access, right? So many other things. So based upon this, you can see that sometimes you might see do not use blockchain as the outcome, and in some cases you might say yes, there is a strong case for public blockchains, which means open systems, like for example RTI systems or something like that, right? And then there might be also private blockchains, where some part of it is private, rest of it is available to public, right? For example, land registry, the exact transaction details might need to be hidden, but the ownership details, everything should be easily available on the blockchain. So this can be some sort of a mixture of private and public blockchains as well, right? So basically there's some design that you need to do before you design the solution, right? So how you will see the digitization progressing, right? Initially in before 2010, it was Internet of Information. The internet sort of enabled a lot of things to happen. Digitization started coming in. Then there was an Internet of Content till now, right? Now there is a Internet of Value phase which is happening, where almost everything will get transferred onto a blockchain for all the reasons that I've talked about right now. Decentralization, cyber security, trust in the transactional system, inefficiencies getting solved, costs getting reduced, all that. So by probably 2030, you will see that much of this will successfully take place. And then what Gartner, the Gartner, the advisory firm, says is that at that point, once the base data gets onto a blockchain, just like maybe 20-25 years ago, all the base data was on physical ledgers, and then it was slowly digitized and turned into a computerized system. Similarly, all these things will happen onto a blockchain. And this is where you'll see a lot of synergy with, say, IoT, machine learning, AI, that kind of stuff, and the ability to use these systems in a far more powerful way because of the the entire data being available on a blockchain. So what are the impact domains, right? If I look at what are the impact domains, low-hanging fruit, you will see that banking and finance, healthcare, supply chain management, retail, education, travel and transport, these are some of the low-hanging fruit. Not that these are the only ones. There is so many different areas which are going to see a lot of transformation because of blockchains. But these are the ones which will get done first, right? So so let's take a look at the industry specific examples from the global perspective. So if you see in energy, Shell is looking at putting the entire transactions on the blockchain, right from the production of oil or natural gas, right down to where it sits in the warehouse and then gets distributed to the retail customers, right? So all the entire journey being tracked on the blockchain, right? This can help a lot in improving the efficiency of this thing and reducing costs. Similarly, public sector in US, etc., DARPA is looking to create a blockchain-based communication system so that they're very resistant to cyber attacks, right? Cyber security shield, you can say, right? Similarly, the US Air Force and the Navy are looking at complete tracking of each and every asset. Like for example, a fighter jet, each and every part that goes into the fighter jet can be tracked and traced and made sure that it is 100% genuine. There are no counterfeit or low quality parts, which means that your mission critical equipment basically is guaranteed to be safe and sound, right? So this is where basically the Naval Air Systems Fleet Readiness Center and the United States Air Force are implementing supply chain solutions for traceability called Basecamp, right? That's the name of the application that they have built. The FDA is looking at it for Food and Drug Administration, right? So the entire, for example, let's say clinical trials for a vaccine. How do you make sure that the clinical trials are not fudged? That that the data that is being logged has not been manipulated later on. Right? So this is very, very clear use case. All the data goes onto a blockchain, then it's almost impossible for anyone in the world to sort of tamper with this. Even a group of hackers all working together will find it impossible to manipulate this data, which is a wonderful example. Similarly, voting. Today, there are so many things which happen. There are always allegations of EVM hacks or, some booth capturing earlier in my childhood, at least, that used to be a common thing. But now if you see, voting on the blockchain is a great example of how much security can come in. Voting on the blockchain means it is very, very secure, untamperable. You can actually audit the entire process perfectly. You can know that there has been no tampering. You can validate that. Cryptographically, mathematically, you can validate these things, which means that there is no question of voting tampering, right? So this is where Niti Aayog is looking at using this for voting systems. Even the Election Commission has very recently announced that it is exploring blockchain for voting systems, right? Automobile supply chain, any automobile or any manufacturer, they want to have zero things sitting in there, zero resources sitting in their warehouse, just sitting there. They want to do this lean supply chain management. This becomes so much easier and so much better because you, for example, with today's SAP based systems, you can automate this or digitize this to some level, right? Maybe right down to, it is not possible to implement this right down to the real part producer sometimes, because there are thousands and thousands of them, and many of them supply to multiple companies, so they don't want to integrate into the supply chain. But with blockchain, what happens is it's open source, free. It's very easy to integrate these into even the last mile connectivity in supply chain management happens very easily. And as a Harvard Business Review put it, right, basically all the three major flows, that is the assets, then the information related to the assets, and the money, all of these things can be captured into a smart contract where all these data are available to you on the blockchain itself, which was not traditionally possible in even say in supply chain chains as one coherent unit. So today that is possible with blockchains. BFSI, Bank of America, American Express, Visa, Mastercard, these are doing integrations of blockchain into their financial services. In fact, if you see Visa and Mastercard together, they have the highest number of blockchain patents in the world, right? They have the maximum number of patents being filed by Visa and Mastercard. So that can tell you how seriously these global payment systems and banks are looking at blockchains, right? In supply chain, especially trade finance and the entire global trade system, Walmart, Maersk, and Alibaba. Maersk is, of course, most of you know about this. It's a shipping corporation. It's around 18 to 20% of global trade happens through Maersk, the Maersk shipping line and the carriers, right? So they implemented something called TradeLens, which has revolutionized their supply chain solutions, right? So that has been done in tie-up with IBM, right? Walmart is also completely tracking its supply chain through blockchains. Alibaba as well, right? In healthcare, there are two main problems. One is again the supply chain. And the second thing is, like duplicate pharmaceutical products, right? Counterfeit products or counterfeit medicines. In India, probably 3 to 5% of medicines are counterfeit, is what the Niti Aayog study says. And here in the global scale, there are startups like Pharma Trust. Then there is a huge startup called MediLedger, and then of course Novartis, which is trying to completely trace the solution right from the API to the customer, right, to the consumer, that level. In the Indian context, Reliance Energy is implementing blockchain. Reliance is in fact one of the largest adopters of blockchain in India, right? Geo, the entire mobile number portability and fraud detection and fraud mitigation is happening on the blockchain, right? TRA has sort of done this. Niti Aayog is really gunning for blockchain adoption. We'll take a look at some of these. State governments too have been doing it. Tamil Nadu government has been doing a lot of, blockchain, POCs and, pilot projects where they want to see whether they can deliver services to their citizens without, any kind of mismanagement or fraud happening by any of the participants, right? Automobile supply chain, Mahindra and Mahindra, Maruti Suzuki, they are trying to encourage blockchain based adoption. Mahindra has definitely done it in the trade finance as well as in the supply chain context. Maruti Suzuki wants to involve many other things like AI, IoT, blockchain to bring in the next generation of solutions. In banking, SBI is the first which adopted blockchains in India. Kotak Mahindra, Axis Bank, these are also doing things where letters of credit have been issued by these banks to Vedanta Group, for example, and 100 crore, just it was a test transaction, you can think about it, 100 crores. It was completely cleared in just, I think, 2 to 3 minutes instead of a few days or a week that it takes normally for a letter of credit to get processed, right? So you can imagine what is the speed up in transaction process speed, right? Mahindra Group is doing this in multiple ways. Of course, Mahindra and Mahindra is using it on the automobile supply the production line as well as supply chain, and Mahindra Group on a whole is applying this. For counterfeit drugs or whatever, Apollo and Stride Pharmacy have tied up to make sure that the entire thing right from API to consumer is captured and made available to the consumer so that they can trust the medicines that they're. So if you see globally, if you see the adoption, it's like most of the developed countries, definitely China, US, Canada, Germany, Brazil, UK, Singapore, all of these are very, very interested in, blockchain, right? So there are multiple, there was a Deloitte study which was done where they interviewed around 12 countries, around 1,300 respondents at the CXO level in each and every major sector, were queried on their blockchain, this thing, and they said that, yes, we are adopting blockchain. We are looking at making blockchain as a part and parcel of our solutions, right? So what are the main use cases, right? In financial services, trade settlement, commercial papers issuance and trading, trade finance, regulatory reporting and compliance. Is everything kosher? Underwriting various transactions, claims processing, right? Digital identity is going to be a very, very major thing. I would not be surprised if we see very soon that the entire identity processing happens in a decentralized manner using digital identity, KYC, AML laws, everything being compliant to that. And then customer onboarding, right? So capital insurance, public sector and banking, these are the financial things. If you see the non-financial, that is retail, warranty receipts, then oil and gas, digital supply chain, the entire tracking of the resources, healthcare, patient record management, and use of this data in an anonymous manner for, say, building better AI models for cancer prediction, etc. All that is happening through blockchain systems. Telecommunications, TRA has started this where roaming fraud, right? People go on roaming, they drop huge bills and then they don't pay or they don't settle. So all this can be captured very, very easily using the blockchain products. So TRA has sort of done this. Land registry, you can imagine land registry, how how involved the processes are, how much inefficiency there is in this entire process. So Niti Aayog and the state governments basically want to put this onto a blockchain, make this into maybe a few hours instead of a few months, right? So that's the kind of transparency and speed and efficiency that can be brought in using blockchain systems. So if you see in the supply chain globally, Tesla wants to completely track the parts that are used in its production line. So they are they have partnered with a blockchain based firm for supply chain management. BMW has used something called part chain, where they track the entire supply chain operations on blockchain, right? So if you see traceability, typically whether it comes to organic food or the quality of the meat or any of the products, right? It is very, very difficult to certify that this particular product is organic or that it is conforming to the standards. Unless you test it, you don't find out. So here in this particular case, the entire journey, for example, Carrefour, it is a European company. So it has initially started out with poultry because of all the bird flu issues, etc. And from there on, once it became a resounding success, they moved on to all the vegetables and so many other farm produce, which are now being tracked on the blockchain, right? So by 2022, this objective is to apply this technology to all FQC products, right? So this can be a great place, agri retail or whatever you want to call it. Travel and transport, whether it be loyalty points or the entire tracking of handling identification, ticketing, boarding passes, so many other parts of it can be easily tracked on the blockchain, right? Cargo safety, we all faced problem where cargo or our luggage, check-in luggage sort of gets misplaced. So all this, it's a logistical nightmare for the airline industry, right? And so there is a urgent need for this kind of blockchain technology, which is across all the participants, all the airlines, tracking their data on the blockchain together, right? So this can mean that you have zero defect processing of your luggage, for example, right? In the trade finance, most of the large corporations like R3 has, along with IBM, set up a trade finance blockchain consortium called Marco Polo. Similarly, US Bancorp, Scotia Bank, HSBC, all these have created their own trade finance networks, Voltron, VTrade, so many others, right? Of course, Batavia was there, but then over time, I guess it shut down. So healthcare blockchain market is growing very, very rapidly. There is globally, if you see, 67% growth every year, right? So they are estimating that in the North America and APAC, right, it's going to witness the fastest growth. So they expect that it will be close to $1 billion, and then it was 2017, it was $44 million. Today, by 2023, they expect it to be $1 billion. Now, when we come to governance, of course, we'll also take a look at Niti Aayog and what they're doing. In Dubai is very clear that it wants to put all government services, each and every aspect of government services, onto the blockchain. So for this, they are doing an enormous upgradation of their systems, of the solutions that they're using to be entirely blockchain based. So what they predict is that this will save a lot of 100 million pages of documents, 25 million hours, and 400 million kilometers of shipping and verification, and the entire transport of these documents, etc., can be completely resolved using blockchain in a very, very secure way. Their visa system, each passport issuance system, health system, everything is getting upgraded to use the blockchain. Now, coming to India, which is finally where we are most interested in seeing what are the opportunities, right? So if you see, this is actually a 2019 report by Avasant. So they have clearly mentioned that around 50 to 60% of all the states in India have already implemented or started implementing blockchain-based projects. So the top 3 use cases are land registry. Of course, it's a huge industry, you can say, right? So land registry, is one of the most important use cases being implemented. Farm insurance. How do you protect the farmers? How do you make sure that they get paid with minimum friction, very quickly, with maximum authentication, right? So if you see the mantra of this government is, minimum government, maximum governance. And if you think about it, blockchain is really about that, right? You build a decentralized system where each and every participant sort of ensures that everything is validated. Multiple organizations can automatically reach consensus about what is the state of a transaction instantly. And so this means that you can actually implement this minimum government, maximum governance perfectly through blockchains, because they're meant for that. Because if you think about it, Bitcoin is a global payment system. There's nobody controlling it, yet it works wonderfully well each and every day for the last 11 years, right? So that should tell you what is the kind of quality and performance and the efficiency that is brought into systems because of blockchain, right? So digital certificates is one more major thing where, for example, anything from pollution certificate, pollution under control, to let's say whatever is your financial certificate saying that yes, this person has paid off the loans, whatever it be, right? Each and every aspect being captured through a digital certificate. Maybe vaccines, for example, today we are looking at the rollout of the vaccine program, right, for COVID. How do you ensure that each and every individual in the country is vaccinated, that it is tracked, that there are no slip-ups, etc.? This would be a wonderful case for blockchain systems, which will anyway take a look at. So Indian use cases, if you see, Mahindra is doing supply chain and trade finance through, for example, invoice discounting, right? This entire thing can be completely automated using blockchains and smart contracts. So you can ensure that the various participants in the network, they get their money fast and quick and very cheaply. The transaction fees are very low. The payments are done instantly, and you make sure that everybody's happy, right? So this can be done very well through a blockchain system. So land registry, of course, the Niti Aayog, basically, if you see, in partnership with Consensus, they try to automate the Chandigarh properties registry. So how do you manage an organization, create a property, view the entire records of a particular property? All this can be done very quickly and transparently using the land registry on blockchain. So this was a pilot project. Now it will be rolled out in further this thing. Similarly, Telangana has also been very alert in and very responsive in trying to implement a blockchain-based land registry solution. Almost, I think there are so many state governments which are doing this at a particular level, right? So, for example, subsidies, right? The entire Gujarat Narmada fertilizer subsidy program, right? So today, this is the existing business flow. This is sourced from PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. So how is the fertilizer manufactured, then paper-based shipment, challans, and then paper records, certifications, lot of delays and some slip-ups that can happen, errors, mistakes, omissions that can happen, right? All this stuff becomes very difficult to track efficiently. Sometimes the payments of the vendors can take 3 to 4 months minimum for the processing claims to happen and then payments to happen. So compare this with, say, where this entire thing is on a blockchain. It's digital and everything is logged onto the blockchain. Each and every transaction, each and every request gets logged onto the blockchain so that it is tamper free. There is no chance of any sort of collusion or any kind of omission happening. And so the entire thing in the pilot literally takes hours instead of months, right? So this is where a lot of efficiency can be brought in. Minimum government, maximum governance can happen, right? So similarly, if you see the pharma industry, how do you make sure that the drugs are this thing? Right from the API manufacturer, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, the actual medicine manufacturing to formulation to the wholesaler, pharmacy, and then directly to the patient. The patient actually gets a strip of tablets with a QR code on top of it. He just scans that with his mobile app and he will get the entire details of the authenticity of the medicine as well as the entire journey right? Whichever, I mean, obviously some details would get anonymized, but he will be able to track the entire journey on the blockchain. So this is where, this is really happening. Vaccination is a, today it's going to be a huge effort, right? The entire thing from the manufacturer to the national store to the state regional store. So this is all sourced from Niti Aayog, right down to the, the particular, end patient level, right? So the entire thing being done on the blockchain is really an advantage. The entire cold chain management. So there can be IoT based sensors in the carrying containers, etc., which can track that the cold chain is preserved, right? The entire identities, of course, UID is, of course, Aadhaar has made it much easier to do this now. You just scan your thumbprint and, you get the vaccine, you are guaranteed that, you are vaccinated. There's no falsification or omission that can happen here, right? Or even mistakes, manual, due to repetitive tasks, sometimes errors creep in. All this can be avoided. Alerting the patients or, the parents of children for a particular vaccination drive. Incentivizing the parents and the officials, right? So how do you incentivize on the blockchain? You can incentivize them using some sort of tokens, right? So if you really performed well, you might get rewarded for that, right? Eradicating the data inconsistencies, corruption, accurate, reliable, and real-time data. This is really useful for monitoring the entire situation. So again, pharma, as I told you, if you want to track a particular medicine, you can just scan the barcode, enter the barcode, and then it will tell you that this is the drug name and this is the expiry date, etc. Each and every aspect of this can be tracked on the blockchain. In ports, are there any questions which have come in? Maybe we can look at some of the questions if any of them have come in. Otherwise, I would encourage people to start asking questions so that we can start looking at your specific queries on blockchain systems, right? So
yeah, but there is one question. I think you've already answered it, but just for the record, I'll just read out the question. So the question is, please explain blockchain technology's role in integrated land records management system in India.
Yeah. So So I think basically that has already been answered to some extent. But yeah, basically what happens is the land records can completely get digitized. Now, this is different from digitizing it onto centralized servers, because these servers are still prone to cyber attacks, manipulation, all this kind of stuff. Especially if you see land registry, there are multiple participants, whether it be the municipal corporation, then the revenue department, so many different participants who are all having a stake in this land registry. Now, if you make it into if you convert this data, it is already digital. All you have to do is upload it into a blockchain where there are multiple participants, each with their own regulatory authority or particular roles, and it becomes very beautifully integrated together. You change the data for a particular land, automatically all the stakeholders in this decision making or in the taxation or in whatever, right, all of them get the updated records because they are referring to this blockchain based registry. So this is where a lot of efficiency. For example, if I buy a land, then I have to go to the state electricity board, and then I have to go to the municipal corporation. I have to go to 4 or 5 other departments to ensure that the records get updated, right? All this can be completely resolved using blockchain systems. The entire participants, whoever are the stakeholders, will automatically get an update on the state of the property. So this can mean a lot of headache being reduced for the end customer, as well as up-to-date records and up-to-date revenues and tracking of what are the revenues that are coming in, right? So this can be really a boon for the government in terms of the revenue collection, so many other things, right? Making sure that no transactions slip through the cracks, right? So similarly, the supply chain for a port, you can imagine what kind of logistics nightmare it would be right now, right? Sometimes containers get lost, misplaced, damaged, whatever. So how do you ensure that all this stuff is captured smoothly, and it helps you design a very smooth system where automatically certain activities start happening? The minute a ship comes in, the containers are unloaded, all the different processes can be fired off through the use of smart contracts. So automatically each and every leg of this entire process can be captured onto the blockchain and thus activate the next phase, right? So this can mean the Mumbai Port Trust has projected savings of $18 billion over just 2 years. $18 billion of savings over 2 years. Now, this is one part of it, savings in terms of money, but in terms of efficiency, ensuring that the goods reach the the containers and the goods reach the particular consumers or the customers. This is another really wonderful benefit that's going to happen because of this. So if you see the farmer producer organizations, right, these are actually they can be very large, but they can also be small. So how do you ensure that FPOs basically are able to give the farmer the maximum revenue, cutting out unnecessary middlemen, at the same time ensuring that everybody is happy, as well as they get their dues in the process, right? So this is where Sahyadri Farmers Producer Company has sort of done a blockchain for food traceability from the farm to the fork, as you call it, right? So this is where a company called Emertech Innovations in Pune, it is actually incubated by IIT Bombay. They are doing this entire process, right? So this means that currently the FPO promises farmers a 25% share of the final price of goods sold by the firm, right? So this is something amazing. Around 15 to 20,000 labels are stuck daily to the produce that is created and then shipped. So this means that the entire agri-business trackability can be brought in a wonderful way. So education, this is not just related to education, it can be related to identity also. So there is a lot of educational fraud or inconsistencies that happen. Student impersonation, in university impersonation, document forgery, right? So this means that ultimately what happens is that, let's say some student is going abroad, there is a lot of delays in processing the entire authenticity of his claims that he's passed out from a particular university, etc. And this means that the processes can take a long time and a lot of wastage of revenue can happen. So if you can completely issue all educational certificates on the blockchain, right, this can mean an enormous increase in trust in the certification, as well as in the particular students profiles, etc. At the same time reducing the inefficiency and saving everybody a lot of time and money, right? Now among the last slides is GST, right? So GST monthly revenue is around 1.25 lakh crores, right? It's a resounding success which has happened. But then again, around 40,000 companies have been red flagged for excess or fraudulent ITC availment, right? So how does the government get its particular revenue while ensuring that every company follows the processes? At the same time, they get the benefits of claiming the GST, right? So how do you make sure that this happens? So if you see the blockchain.gov.in, right? They are a part of the government which is actually responsible for research and implementation of GST through blockchain, right? So this is such an enormous project, and the kind of impact it is going to have on inefficiencies, making sure that a cross-border state flow of goods, each and every aspect, right, gets tracked smoothly. There is zero downtime or delays in the processing of claims. Everything being done through the blockchain is a wonderful application of blockchain. It is going to really mean the minimum government, maximum governance comes in a major way. It is going to mean a lot of benefits. Smart contracts can actually capture the entire logic of what are the GST taxation rules are present, and then it becomes very easy for validation and input by even the end industry to ensure that the audit trail is perfectly processed. So ultimately, if you think about it, the point being that blockchains basically are helping to streamline the processes, to bring in efficiencies which were not possible earlier. Right? Especially if you get into the technological implications of blockchain, you will see that till today, it was not possible to have this kind of trust in the underlying data. Right? That is what blockchains really bring in. And it's though in this particular session, we have actually tried to take a look at what is the impact of blockchain and what is the disruption that it can cause, the positive disruption, basically, right? In the Indian industry, right? What are the benefits for it for the Indian industry to adopt? This is what we looked at. And so it is very important to understand that each and every aspect of our industry, especially wherever we are connecting to global markets, right? These will become driven by blockchain. So it is very important for us to understand what are the various phases of blockchain adoption: proof of concept, then MVP, pilot, and then finally production systems. How do you ensure that these are integrated into the existing business processes? All these kind of things are very, very important part for us to understand. And once we adopt blockchain systems, you are going to see a network effect coming, where each and every participant in this blockchain network sort of brings in a synergy and a lot of benefits, much more than the sum. The whole is larger than the sum of the parts, right? So that's one way to put blockchains. The network effect basically means that you're bringing in synergy and multiplicative factors, which will mean a lot of benefits for everybody involved. So probably, Naren, what do you think you would like to? You're on mute, I think, Naren.
There are a couple of more questions. I just thought we'll pick up those questions. So one of them is, I think I'll answer this question. So it's like, do you think there is a skill gap in blockchain technology? How can we enhance the skill and talent landscape in India to overcome the shortfalls? So I'll take that question, Bharat. I would definitely say there is a gap, but eventually that's one reason why, as an organization, we kind of started the journey a couple of years back. So what is it that we need to do to bridge this gap? We need to strengthen the grassroots. So we need to definitely strengthen right from the college stream as well. Basically, we need to go back and strengthen the grassroots, so that the supply chain, basically, there are trained resources coming in right through the grassroots levels, and that's the only way that we can definitely look at building a better future in terms of a technology savvy future. Because blockchain is a technology, as I'm sure Bharat would have, as Bharat explained in terms of industry. So the only word that I get in my mind for blockchain is it's an all-pervasive technology, which means that there is no one industry that blockchain will not be able to penetrate. So in that scenario, definitely, I think when I say we, all of us individually together, we'll have to join hands, work together in building this entire ecosystem, wherein we try to work amongst each other and build the capacity, basically. And blockchain, I'm sure Bharat would be able to relate to this. But blockchain is known for open source, wherein that brings it more transparency. So absolutely, that's the way in terms of building this entire capacity building for blockchain. So I hope that answers the question. So the next question, Bharat, there's one question for you. I think you can take this.
Yeah.
I'll read out the question. So the question is, like, you mentioned about data in blockchain being stored at the source level. So how much storage capacity available with each user needs to be separated for the data storage specifically for blockchain data? So basically, in a nutshell, the question is, what would be the data storage?
How do you solve the data problem, right? Or where does the data get stored? So basically what happens in a blockchain is that each and every node in the system is sort of replicating the data, right? So the first question that typically comes is, won't this lead to data bloat, or, how do you ensure that this is stored properly? So overall, if you see the kind of data that gets stored onto blockchains, it is very important to understand what kind of data gets stored onto a blockchain. Typically, transactional information gets stored onto a blockchain, which means that it is very, very compact. It is very, very concise, right? Any kind of data like videos or PDF files or this thing, these will be stored separately onto a decentralized storage network, and then it will be referenced into the blockchain using some cryptographic hashing method. So basically, you store the data somewhere else, you take a fingerprint of the data and you insert it into the blockchain. So that way you make sure that there is a cryptographic linkage between the transactional details and the supporting data, right? So for example, in the legal system, right, courts are trying to find a way to take all the forensic evidence, right, and completely put it onto a blockchain, in the sense that the forensic evidence would get stored onto another maybe cloud or whatever, and then this would be stored as a sort of a fingerprint onto the blockchain, so that there is no question of even the smallest amount of tampering happening. Right? So as far as the data storage, yes, this can be stored on the cloud. It can today, I think, even if you look at public blockchains, 8 to 10 terabyte systems are very cheap. I mean, you can buy a 8 terabyte hard disk for like 7,000-8,000 rupees. So you can imagine, right, how cheap storage has become. So we never need to worry about the storage aspects of it, because ultimately you're trying to capture very important data. This data is so important. For example, let's take GST, right? It's so important that the cost of storage is it doesn't ever come into the factor. So that's my answer to that. Any other questions?
But there's one, there's one more question. The question is, how do you think blockchain will be able to overcome the overall risks associated with financial inclusion?
So see, basically, if you think about it, financial inclusion can happen at multiple levels. One is that the last person in the country, for example, is included into the thing, which is actually, if you think about it, blockchains are a peer-to-peer technology. They are called as a peer-to-peer technology. They are designed to bring in financial inclusion, right? So because these, for example, earlier you had the situation where banks might not be able to have a center in one particular village because it's too far away, right? Maybe there is a 500 people living in the villages around, 500 or 1,000 or something, and that's just not enough for a bank to set up a particular bank branch there. So here what has happened, you can already see how digital payments has changed this. Now just imagine what happens when you take this and you put it onto a blockchain, which is a peer-to-peer technology. It basically brings in financial inclusion by default. So all you need is a digital identity. You don't need anything more. For example, Aadhaar is already an identity. All you have to do is take this identity system and integrate it with blockchain systems, and everybody is banked. There are multiple ways of solving this problem. So,
but there's one more question, and after this question, I think, considering that we do have time, I would like, I would want you to maybe pick up a couple of use cases and explain in detail. Maybe you can pick up the healthcare example and kind of start from the journey to the end, or pick up the example of supply chain, so that the overall clarity in terms of blockchain comes in a larger way. So one question that is there right now is, what are the challenges with implementing a blockchain approach in manufacturing or supply chain sector?
Could you repeat that question? I couldn't hear it properly.
All right. So what are the challenges with implementing a blockchain approach in manufacturing or supply chain sector?
So yeah, this is actually a very good question. All of the questions still have been really good. So if you think about it, the major challenges are, first thing is, whenever you look at supply chains, it's not that supply chains are not already present, right? Each and every organization has spent considerable amount of money on bringing in supply chain use cases into their particular industry. But there are multiple issues here. One is, sometimes what happens is, there are multiple systems of supply chain which get integrated. Maybe sometimes it happens that, two companies merge together. They each have their own supply chain solution earlier. And so now integrating these two together can be a major challenge. Or sometimes, you have older systems which now get upgraded into something cloud-based or whatever. And now how do you take these multiple, like there are large organizations with data on mainframes, right? Mainframes are like 1980s technology, right? So you can imagine the kind of challenges that are there. All this data being, completely accessible is best done through a blockchain system. But of course, there are always the challenges where you have to integrate this in a slow phased manner. where you first do a proof of concept, you make sure that you have captured the requirements, then you go to the MVP stage, the minimum viable product, where you sort of have it running with the ideal data, and then you go to a pilot stage where maybe some of the data from the supply chain or whatever is slowly passed on to the blockchain based system. It is any performance issues, bugs, etc. are resolved, and then you do a transition to a complete blockchain system. Obviously this is a multi-year project, it's a large team of developers, etc., which are going to be required for this. So it's not that the minute you say blockchain, it's going to get integrated. If you start today, maybe 3 years from today, you will be actually ready with a blockchain, a fully blockchain compliant and a fully blockchain based 3 to 5 years, right, overall. So people have to start today so that they can get onto the globally. If you see, almost every major company expects that any import or export should slowly happen over blockchain. So it's very important that we start integrating today, so that by the time it becomes a mandate, right, that by the time the Indian industry is ready for that.
Bharat, before I kind of take the next question, why don't you just go to the previous, like considering that a lot of questions on how to bridge the skill gap is coming up. So I just thought we'll quickly tell what is it that we plan to do for specifically with the FICCI members. So for people who are genuinely interested to learn blockchain with a live faculty-led training programs, you're always welcome to join our programs. For specifically for FICCI members, we're offering a 30% discounted pricing as well. And the batches, we run it on weekend batches. So people who are interested, there are the email IDs that's given. Please send out an email with the voucher code. We'll be more than happy to accommodate you in the upcoming batches. All right, so Bharat, the next question is, how does smart contract work? How is it different from current process of contracting? Wonderful question.
Very good question. Actually, high quality of questions. I think this is because all of the people are very much interested in seeing how blockchains can actually integrate into their particular solutions, right? Correct. So if you think about it, a legal contract and a smart contract are slightly different from each other, because smart contracts actually take care of the mechanics of a legal contract. So if you look at any legal contract, there are aspects which are related to what happens in case of dispute, right? Who's going to be the authority, etc., etc. So those are the legal implications. Then there are the mechanics that, for example, that in this particular scenario, within T+2 days, the settlement should happen. That the, let's say a dematerialized share should end up in the demat account of the recipient, right? So all these guarantees and all those things can be executed using smart contracts. Smart contracts are basically computer programs, right? So today there are already, for example, if you look at a stock exchange, right? A stock exchange already is automated to some extent, right? But even if you see today, in the US, for example, it's T+4 or 5 days for a share to be settled. When you buy a share or sell a share, the settlement process can take 5 days, right? In India, it's T+2. So you can imagine this thing. And now New York Stock Exchange, for example, is looking at, can we implement the same logic on top of a blockchain? Because basically the real delay is in having each and every stakeholder in the system validate and cross-reference and ensure that their records are updated, that everything is settled. That's where the entire problem comes in, right? So if you use a blockchain consortium based approach with smart contracts mechanizing or automating say 90% of the process, what basically happens is that there is very, very little disagreement or any kind of dispute resolution that has to happen. And so the entire trade settlement can happen within a few seconds or a minute at the most. So this is where blockchains are going to bring in things. Very good question. Smart contracts are automation, and then making sure that the automation is intelligent as well as it is tamper free. Make sure that the data can be trusted by all the stakeholders. Right?
But there are a couple of more very, very interesting questions.
Okay,
the next one is actually very good. So how is the data verified / validated, which is fed into the blockchain? So this is a question, and he's like, the explanation is, because once the data gets in, we can't interrupt the transfer process in between, regardless if the data is correct or incorrect. He's wanting to know how are we even very sure whether the data that we are entering is valid. I think.
Okay. So
You take that
obviously,
question, yeah.
see, again, a very good question, because ultimately, in reality, when you look at, see, in theory, everything is beautiful, right? But when you get into the realities of the world, how do you ensure that fake data or, tampered data or, any kind of wrong data doesn't enter? So this is where actually, if you think about it, blockchains are not a silver bullet by themselves, right? One part of the solution is going to be having, say, automatic data being pushed in. For example, in a supply chain situation, right? Suppose you are trying to take some, very, let's say the COVID vaccine, right? You have this cold chain, minus 20 degrees minimum, minus 80 degrees is required for some of these vaccines, right? How do you ensure that that the vaccine has actually traveled throughout the legs of the journey with the proper cold storage solution, right? So here what will happen is you will have IoT sensors and automated things with digital identity. So these IoT sensors, basically they are sort of acting like a node on the blockchain network, and they are digitally signing the data and making sure that it is sent into the blockchain, so that there is absolutely no way of faking this data. No other sensor in the world can generate this, because it is based on something called cryptography, public private key encryption, right? So this is one aspect of it. Then there are multiple things like AI ML integrations, where you will try to do some fraud detection through heuristic algorithms, right? You have all this trustworthy data on the blockchain which shows you a certain pattern, and then it helps you to catch something that is not fitting into the pattern, right? So it's no technology by itself is a golden bullet, right? For example, let's say AI ML, machine learning depends upon trustworthy data, right? If you don't have trustworthy sanitized data, it's not going to work. You're going to get wrong conclusion. Where does the trustworthy data come from? It comes from blockchains. Where does the blockchain get its trustworthy data from? From IoT sensors or automated biometric scanners or so many other systems. So it's a very symbiotic relationship between AI, ML, blockchain, IoT, all these technologies. So these solutions need to be built, including and incorporating all this. These are not competitors; they are actually very much coexistent with each other. They are required to coexist with each other. So excellent question.
I think subtly you also mentioned a point, which is the way the future, the way I read whatever your answer is, the future belongs to not one technology. It's going to be the way all these technologies work together in tandem. To be more precise, it's going to be blockchain, IoT, AI, ML, and how these three deep tech, how are these going to join hands together and build a better future for the world, and more importantly for India, basically. So I'll just take one last question.
One more point that I would like to raise is that if you see, typically the chance for false or fraudulent or spurious data to get into a blockchain network is typically where there is no existing data. So this data is coming in fresh from an analog system, like a file or some customer inputting his data. Right? But more and more, what's going to happen is blockchain systems are going to get integrated into each and every facet of our industry as well as in our consumers. So what happens, for example, today, how easy is it for a fraudulent guy to open a bank account? It's very, very difficult, because you got Aadhaar. So the minute you got Aadhaar, you got this biometric information, which impossible to fake, right? So here what happens is, as more and more there's something called a network effect, where as more and more systems become digital and blockchain based, automatically the data will not come from analog systems, they'll come from other blockchain based systems. So this means that the ability to falsify information, for example, let's say GST, if I bought something on the blockchain, and then I'm going to upload that invoice to the GST network, where is the chance? So each and every leg of the journey now becomes integrated tightly with blockchain. So it's very, very difficult to tamper with this data. So that's the second part of the solution.
Perfect. I think we are in those interesting phases where we are seeing both in terms of technology advancement, plus as an overall country we are evolving towards that. We are embracing technology at the prime. That's what I would say. And and thanks to forums like Wiki, because they are definitely helping in a huge way, because they've been so visionary that they have already started these deep tech series. So I think
Yeah.
that's where the future belongs to. All right, so let's take one last question, Bharat. All right. So the question is, the fingerprint of the stored data in a cloud also needs to be given access to the stakeholders who are on the blockchain system, right? Does that mean that the cloud storage becomes a gateway for hacking the system once the fingerprint of the storage location or data is procured?
This is again, a superb question. Looks like the people are really interested in these particular use cases. So, for example, let me just give you an example, right? So recently, maybe 1 year ago, I think there was a RSA conference, right? So this is a cyber security conference which happens, in which one of the people was talking about how blockchains are going to sort of make it very difficult for hackers, right? So let's take a look at this. Now, what happens is, typically, let's say a cloud system gets compromised, right? The hacker gains entry, is just sitting there. Typically today, hackers don't destroy systems. They just sit, they snoop, they observe, and they use the data to do their, to do whatever they want to do. Typically, what happens is, at one point, either they are trying to manipulate the data, or once they manipulate the data, they want to get out. This is where they want to actually wipe the slate clean. Typically, in a cyber security attack, what happens is, once the hacker exits, he sort of puts some sort of an, like a software bomb, you can say, which sort of wipes the entire trail. All the devices get wiped out, right? Now, here what happens is that by using blockchain-based systems where this data gets pushed onto a public blockchain, now public blockchains are so strong that nobody has managed to hack them till today, right? Nobody in the world, even an army of hackers, has not managed to hack these systems, because of the way this data is stored in millions and millions of nodes, right? So if you want to tamper with this data, you have to find a way to attack and wipe out data in millions of systems, which is a nightmare. No hacker has managed to do it successfully till today. Whereas it's very easy for a hacker who gains access to some certain secure data repository to wipe out the trail, right? So this is where blockchains are actually giving a lot of power. And when you say that the cloud data can get compromised, it cannot be, because the cryptographic fingerprint which is stored on the blockchain can be stored. For example, let's say I do a transaction worth $1 million to, say, Sarika, right? And then basically what do? I go back, maybe I receive some huge consignment from some particular industry. Now what do? I try to go back into the system and I try to tamper this data so that I have only paid maybe $100,000 for this. Now the problem is, the minute I try to do this, the cryptographic hash changes, and this will not agree, that the transactional data and the stored data will not agree with each other, which means it is not going to be accepted. The system will not accept this, which means I cannot tamper with the data. And to do this takes such enormous resources. You will literally have to spend hundreds of billions of dollars sometimes to make this happen on a public blockchain. And enterprise blockchains can also use this. Once every so many blocks, some audit data gets pushed onto a public blockchain. It's impossible to hack these systems. So enormous security. Blockchains are not only secure, they can help secure other infrastructure.
Thanks, Bharat. I think there's one last question, so I just would like to take that. So I'll take that, Bharat, so don't worry.
Okay.
So the question is, there are millions of cases pending in various courts. So will the blockchain help judiciary more to become more efficient and transparent? All right, so the answer
maybe
is
I'll take this first. Because Niti Aayog has basically, Niti Aayog has talked about this in their, if you look at, for Niti Aayog's study on blockchain, right? If you see 2 out of 3 court cases out there are basically land disputes, right? Land disputes. Just imagine if you solve the land registry issues, you're basically solved, 60 to 70% of all the cases that are going to be ever coming forward, right? So this is where, you can definitely think of blockchains benefiting. Now, maybe I'll hand it over to you.
Now that you've answered that in that way, I'll have to give a different answer. All right. So the answer is this. blockchain is a technology. The whole purpose why the world is adopting blockchain or the world is heading towards blockchain is because of its efficiency and transparency. So the moment you get in blockchain in any industry, or let it be even on our day-to-day life, it is going to bring in that transparency and obviously bring in more efficiency. So it doesn't matter whether we apply it in judiciary, whether we apply it in real estate, whether apply it in supply chain. As long as we apply it, we're going to definitely get that efficiency as well as the entire transparency that we all need. So basically, it is going to be more of beautiful governance that can happen in blockchain. So I think with that note, I don't see any other questions coming, Bharat. So I would pass it on to Sarika. So thank you so much, Bharat. I think it was a wonderful, very insightful session. And also, more than anything, the questions that we received were really, really amazing. So yeah, Sarika, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So thank you, Bharat. It was a really lovely session. I mean, it was quite a learning experience for me personally. I'm sure that's been with the audience as well. And thank you, Narendra, for supporting the session with the quality of the questions. And I think I could see Narendra saying this is the last, and it never went to be a last question. And I can assure you, Bharat, there are many more in pipeline which my team.
Oh no, yeah, definitely. There'll be
more than happy to answer
questions offline. We'll take those questions offline for the viewers in the audience. Thank you for being there. There were more than 200 participants logged in for this session, so we can see the enthusiasm and the I would say the need for the subject to be taken up in depth. So, like I said in the starting, this is just the beginning. Vicky is running a deep tech series, and we take up various subjects. Even on the blockchain, we can see maybe we would come up with the next series again on this one with a little advanced version. We did have a discussion on the subject. We did understand the importance of the blockchain and how it is being utilized in the sectors. Like what are the various companies doing it, and of course with the audience asking about various, I would say, the practical line questions that how these data can be taken care of and how, Bharat, there was definitely a very high need from the audience to have a detailed discussion on the smart contract. That's something
definitely
we can definitely see if we can have it positioned up for the upcoming sessions on the discussions of the subject.
Definitely.
So with this words, I really thank you, Bharat and Narendra, and of course the team of Imago who has supported us continuously for building up the content of this discussion. We will definitely share any feedback, which I'm requesting our viewers to share it with Vicky. Narendra's already mentioned, and there's a display of the slide where if you want to register and avail the benefit of the reduced price for the course, so please do so. You can write back to us on vicky.ict@vicky.com or at skill@imargo.in. We'll be happy to facilitate that through our members. And from your side also, Bharat and Narendra, thank you for sharing the thoughts. If you feel anything else from the side, from the viewer side, you would request from Vicky, we'll be happy to facilitate that. So thank you all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the secretary who has helped us in putting up this whole session. I understand it has gone up well, and we'll continue to have discussions on the subject. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, viewers, and thank you, Margaret. With this,
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sarika. Thank you so much for the opportunity to evangelize blockchain, which is a technology that's very close to all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.